Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining another DevCast. Here today, we are going to learn how to create PureCloud custom client apps and utilize the Client App SDK. We have Jim Crespino here. He is the Senior Director of Developer Evangelism. And on Q&A, we have Becky Powell. She will be helping answer any questions throughout the session. Before I hand it off to Jim, I'd just like to thank everyone for registering for this session. This is our third developer tutorial that we've done, and hopefully the third of many more. And so thank you for joining and for being here today. I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping rules before I hand things off. So the first is that this is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to you within 24 hours. So that you can watch this session at any time. There is a resource box on your screen that you can open containing links to the sample code and instructions, and clicking through won't take you away, so it'll just open a new tab as you're watching the presentation. Also, if you have any trouble streaming the web app, if you and your troubleshooting has failed, you're all developers, so I'm sure you're great at that. If that doesn't work, send us an email at developersupport@genesis.com. And finally, if you have any questions or you have any suggestions, anything like that, again, same email address. We'd love to hear from you. For Q&A, we will be answering the questions in that Q&A box, so you just submit your questions there. And we will leave some time at the end for Jim to go over your questions live. So without further ado, I'd like to hand things off to Jim Crespino.
Thank you, Walla. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Jim Crespino, and as Walla said, I'm the Senior Director of Developer Evangelism here at Genesis. So I work with our partners primarily, helping them to integrate so that they can be listed in our application marketplace called the App Foundry. And today I'm going to demonstrate something near and dear to my heart that I spend a lot of time with our partners doing, and that's how to integrate third-party web applications into the PureCloud user interface, primarily using the Client App SDK and the PureCloud APIs. So let me share my screen, and we'll jump right in. All right, so I'm already logged into PureCloud. You should be able to see my profile on the screen. PureCloud applications, third-party applications, exist in two locations. So there is a menu along the top called the Apps menu. You may or may not have that. If you don't have any apps defined yet, you won't have that menu. But if you do, you can click on that and you can go and navigate to any of the apps that are available from third parties. And then there's also a widget sidebar over on the left nav area that slides out, and it displays apps in a tabbed view. If you have more than one, there'll be tabs at the top, and you can cycle through those. Those apps are embedded as iframes, and I'm going to show you how to define those. So before we get into the actual definition of the app, apps are made visible via groups. So you define a group of users who should be able to see particular applications. Users can be in more than one group, so you can gather groups of applications together and make users members of multiple groups, so they'll see all the applications in all the groups. Today we're going to be just doing one group. So I'm going to come in to the directory section of PureCloud Admin and go into groups. I'll create a new group name. We'll call this DevCast for today. And I'll make it an official group, and I'm going to make it viewable to owners only. I don't want anybody using this group with our collaborate function where they can send chat messages to the group and people can respond. This group will only be used for application visibility. You can see I created this group so I'm automatically the owner and a member of it. If I want to add other members, I'm going to click Edit, and I'm going to go to Individuals. And I'll add in Allie Hokeborn, who is, she's not able to be here today, but she's usually the organizer of the DevCast here. But by adding her as a member, she would see the applications that we're going to define today. The next time that she logs into this PureCloud org, the apps would be available to her. All right, so we're done with the group. That's really all we have to do group-wise is define the group and define the members of the group. I'll go back to admin, and there is a section in admin called integrations. And inside integrations is another section, or is an area called integrations itself. That's where we're going to go define our applications to be visible. To add a new integration, there's a little plus integrations up in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to click plus. This is where you would see built-in integrations that come with your PureCloud org in addition to any App Foundry integrations that you have purchased that are available for your org. Today we're going to use one of the built-in integrations, and that's called a custom client application. And I'm going to click install. And that puts me into a template where I can define my application and where I would like it located. So we'll give it a name. Call this DevCast. The first application I'm going to show you is how to embed Wikipedia. Just as an iframed application, it will have no integration with PureCloud at all. It doesn't know how to integrate. But I'll show you how to embed that. And so we'll call this the Wikipedia app. And if I go to the configuration tab, there are properties that I can define. The first is the URL where this web application lives. So we'll put in wikipedia.org. The application type, standalone or widget, defines where you want the application to live, which is either up on the top menu bar or on the left nav bar. Standalone's up on the top, widget is over on the left. Since this is the Wikipedia app, I'm going to put this up on the apps menu. I'll leave application category blank. The iframe sandbox options, if you're embedding a third-party application and you want to limit what the iframe allows that application to do, you can change some of those. Those are just the standard allow options for an iframe in HTML. And then the last thing I'm going to do for this particular application is define the group of people that can see it. I'll go to pick DevCast out of my list here. Save that. And I will save. Now, it's not going to be immediately available for two reasons. First, after defining the application, you have to activate it. It's currently inactive. That makes it available now to users who log in who are members of that group. It's not, it doesn't refresh my apps menu right away. I would have to reload my browser for that to show up. But before I reload, I want to create one more, so I only have to reload once. I'm going to add one more custom client application. Again, for Wikipedia, we'll call this DevCast Wikipedia widget. I'm going to go to the configuration. I'm going to add the URL again. I'm going to put it on the widgets on the left-hand side so it'll slide out. Again, I'm going to put it into the DevCast group. And I'm going to do one other thing this time. Widgets have a unique property that they can have an icon along those top tabs to help highlight which application they are instead of having names. So I'm going to grab JSON here. The advanced configuration, there are several properties you can define. You can define a title for the item in different languages. You can define the lifecycle, which we'll be covering soon, and you can define an icon to show for widgets. The schema, you can take a look at the schema by downloading it, clicking the download button, and if you do, you'll get a schema that looks like this in JSON, so you can go through and look and see what are the property names, what types are they, what's the description of the property. So that's just for reference. You can download that and look at that schema. For now, for my Wikipedia widget, I've defined to use the save icon from Wikipedia itself. So I'll save that. Again, it puts it in the list of integrations, but it doesn't automatically activate it, so I'll activate that. All right, they're activated. Now I'm going to reload PureCloud so that my apps menu and my widgets slide out will refresh with those newly defined applications. And we'll let PureCloud settle here for a second. And if I click on the apps menu, now I have my DevCast Wikipedia app. If I select that, as real estate, it gets this whole iframe, and it can render itself. So any application you embed can have the whole iframe. The iframe does reduce size if you're doing collaborate and you're doing chat, it'll take up the right-hand side. It'll slide over. You can also expand and contract. You can give it the menu back, or you could get rid of it by expanding that way. So that's the application of Wikipedia. And then the widget side, if we slide out, we've got our original widget that was there, but we've also got Wikipedia as a widget to slide in and out, as you can see there. Now you might say, great, so you embedded Wikipedia, big deal. There are several good uses for just embedding an application. Perhaps you embed Zoom as a meeting application so that your agents could start a web sharing session. They can start a Zoom session, get the URL, and paste it into a chat that they're having with the consumer, and they could use Zoom to collaborate with them. Or maybe they have a virtual reality application. They're a service company, and they use VR on a phone to have the customers, scan their dishwasher and help them with trouble with that. So again, they could embed a VR application as a third-party app that does not integrate with PureCloud, but it's just simply available. They could start a session, get that URL, send it over a chat or an SMS to the customer, and start a VR session right there from within PureCloud with very little work whatsoever. All right, but that's not what we're here today to learn. We want to write our own app, and we do want to integrate it tightly with PureCloud. So I have created an app that I'm hosting out on GitHub Pages. I'm going to go to admin, and I'm going to create a custom client app for that one as well. Let me go to integrations again. I'll add a new integration, custom client app again. DevCast, and I'm going to call this Ad Astra, which is Latin for 2 stars. This is a game. You'll see in just a second. It's a game that I'm helping some high schoolers develop to teach them how to write games for mobile devices. But we're going to use it here in our app as a demonstration. So my game is at Crespino Ford. I'm just going to copy that. Give me a second. All right, now there's a couple of things about this URL. Again, it's HTTPS-based, so that PureCloud can iframe it successfully, so it'll get through browser security. It's out on my GitHub IO page, so it's a static, single-page HTML JavaScript application. But I've got a couple of query parameters that PureCloud can send along. These may or may not be important to you in your integration, but just know that PureCloud can interpolate these values for you onto the URL. So the first is the language that the PureCloud user has selected to use. So if you do localization of your application in JavaScript, you can get the language that they're using and use the proper localization library to render your user interface. The second one, if it's important, is to know what environment PureCloud is running in. So PureCloud currently runs from, I believe, 6 AWS regions across the globe, soon to expand. If there is a reason that you need to know what environment what AWS region they're running from. You can receive that as a parameter as well. So that's our URL. I'm going to, again, make this a standalone, so it'll be available in the top apps, and I'm going to make it available to our DevCloud or DevCast group. And for now, I'm not going to add any properties on the advanced. We'll come back and do that here in just a minute. Let's just make sure that we can get this game shown on our apps menu. Hold down to DevCast, add Astra, and I'll activate that. It's activated. I'll reload the page so it becomes available on my apps menu. All right, now I've got add Astra. It's going to go out to GitHub Pages. It's going to load my game. This is a little game built with phaser.io. The little character just runs around. You can jump and capture stars, keeps your score. So it's just a little game. You could think maybe your agents might like a little break, something to do while they're on break. The game is not terribly exciting yet. There's nothing that can kill me in this game. I can just run along and play. What I want to demonstrate here with PureCloud, though, is PureCloud has something called the Client App SDK. It's an SDK to allow you to interact with the PureCloud user interface. As a first-class citizen, you might like to know when your app's been loaded, when it has focus, when it doesn't have focus, when the customer's logging out of PureCloud or the agent is logging out of PureCloud. You might want to know those things so that you could, when you're bootstrapped, starting up, you might need to go set up resources, pull in resources, set up connections to third-party systems, whatever. As your app focuses and loses focus, you may need to stop using certain resources. Or when you shut down, you may need to end sessions. So I'll show you how to do that lifecycle management. In our lifecycle management, what we'll do is when we lose focus, we'll pause the game. And when we gain focus, we'll resume the game so that we don't die as we are not in focus. And then the second thing we'll do with this is we'll include the PureCloud APIs, so we'll authenticate with PureCloud, and we'll use a couple of the APIs to monitor activity of conversations in a queue, like how many calls come into the queue. And as calls enter, bombs will drop. So the more calls in queue, the more bombs, the more likely are to die, and that agent will get back on queue. All right, so let's get going with that. I'm going to go back into admin. And I'm going to go to my integrations into my Add Astra application here. I'll go to the configuration, and on the advanced, and grab a bit more JavaScript here. Paste that in. All right, so this again uses that schema, uses a few more properties in that schema. The first one is the lifecycle property, and that's an object that defines what hooks we want to be notified of in our code for when we are bootstrapped. So bootstrap is when your application has been loaded. Focus is when it has focus. Blur is when it does not have focus. Stop is when PureCloud is unloading that application. Ephemeral, it can be true or false. An ephemeral tells PureCloud whether it's okay to frequently load and unload your app or whether it can only be unloaded in dire situations. So if PureCloud were running out of resources and needed to free up some resources on the machine, it might shut down applications that are ephemeral, that are able to easily shut down and start up. But if you are an application that, you have a lot of bootstrap time in setting up connections to remote systems, you might set ephemeral to be false so that PureCloud will keep your app in memory once it's loaded and do its best to not have to shut it down. The other property is the I10N, which is for localization, and this is really for the menu names. This is all that this controls is the menu names that are shown in the apps menu. If, in this case, for French or for Spanish, it would use the Spanish translation of To the Stars for Ad Astra. So I'll save that. All right. So we've told PureCloud that we want to be notified of those lifecycle events. We need to tell our code to recognize those. So my code right now only has the phaser.io game code in it in a big script tag. I'm going to add some script here for the PureCloud Client App SDK. Okay, so what I've done here, pasted in a bit of code. The first is just a script tag to go out to the PureCloud CDN and ask it to pull in the PureCloud Client App SDK. I'm pulling in version 1.3 right now, which is the latest version. I've got a couple of variables, but primarily when the application loads on document.ready from jQuery, when that fires, I'm going to log a couple of messages to the console that tell me what version, make sure I'm running the right version of the Client App SDK. I'm actually going to create an instance of that object, the Client App SDK, and put it into my client app so I can use that later. I'm going to log out the PureCloud environment that I'm running from because that is made available to me after I create an instance of the client app. That's one of the properties that's made available to me. Then we come to the listeners. So I've got my Bootstrap listener. This is off the client app. There's a lifecycle object and an add Bootstrap listener where I've got an anonymous object or anonymous function. I'm just going to log that I'm being bootstrapped, and I've got a 50 millisecond timeout delay in there to post a toast message in the upper right corner of PureCloud to say, hey, I've been bootstrapped. The next two functions are the focus and blur listeners. They're built about the same way. They're not anonymous functions, and you'll see why in just a minute. So I've got a focus for or a function for when we have focus. I'll log that to the console. In this case, I'll resume the game. If we get focus, I'll make sure the game is running, and I'll put a toast message up in the upper right to say, hey, the app has focus. So again, we go to the client app, to the lifecycle object, and add our focus listener. So it's going to fire that method. On app blur is the same way. Log an event, pause the game if we get blurred. If they navigate off of our app, we'll pause the game. Again, we'll show a little toast message, and we'll add that listener. The last listener we have is the stop listener. So when PureCloud is shutting down our app or the agent is logging out of PureCloud, we'll get notified. Here we remove, this is why I couldn't use anonymous functions for blur and focus, is because I want to remove them from the focus listener for PureCloud, just to be a nice corporate citizen of the user interface there. And then we'll show a toast message that the app was stopped. Of course, if we're logging out of PureCloud, you're not probably going to see this message because PureCloud's quitting. But if PureCloud were to shut down your application, you would see this toast message that it was being shut down. And then we've got a nice little convenience function for logging those events to the console. So let me save this work. Put this, go update my GitHub pages repository here. All right, that is pushed. Now, I am going to bring up the developer tools for two reasons. One, it's helpful to troubleshoot what's going on in your JavaScript code of your application. But also in Chrome, at least, this modifies the reload so that you have an empty cache and hard reload. So PureCloud likes to cache the application code. that I had. So if I didn't empty the cache, we would not easily pick up the changes that I just made. By clearing the cache and reloading PureCloud, it'll go out and pull up the latest version that I checked into GitHub of my Ad Astra game. Of course, it takes longer to reload after you clear the cache, but it's a small price to pay. It's much faster than waiting for the cache timeout to clear. So we'll let PureCloud get logged in and settled here. Okay, so on apps, I'm going to go pick Ad Astra. And we should see a couple of things here. We should see in the console some log messages, and we should see some toast messages in the upper right as it loads our game. Here's our game loading. Here's the environment we're running from. Here's the version of the SDK we've loaded. And we didn't get to see the Bootstrap menu, but we'll see the focus and blur. So if I were to change off of this app, go to admin, and we get here's our toast message. It says we're blurred. So the game paused. And if I go back to it, we have focus and the game resumed. Now, it's not easy to tell that the game was paused or resumed in that case. We don't have any movement really, but I will try and jump and pause, and we should be in the middle of a jump. If I go back to it, there it goes, and it just landed, and now kind of goes, hey, when Phaser IO doesn't like when it loses focus there. So back to running in our game. All right, so that's all great. So we're getting our notification messages, our application is firing, and we're getting our events and such out to the console log. So you can see the lifecycle events being logged in the console log. And now I want to use the PureCloud API. I'm going to do two things with the API. Instead of just saying welcome, I'm going to say welcome and show the name of the user here. Their full name, not their email address, their full name. And I'm also going to subscribe to conversation events for a queue so that as conversations enter the queue, bombs will drop and I will have to avoid them. So that doesn't require any configuration changes to the application definition, but it does require some code. So let me paste that code in. This is code that I snagged from one of the tutorials on our developer site and slightly modified for my use. So again, I need to include, I have an include here for from the PureCloud CDN. I'm going to include the platform API definitions for JavaScript. And that's going to allow me to call the REST API for PureCloud. Now, as I interact with the API, I'm going to have to authenticate on behalf of the user. And I can't do that without creating an OAuth client. So I'm going to go back into admin. And under the integrations section, I'm going to go to OAuth. And I'm going to add a new OAuth client. Call this DevCast. And Astra, just so that we know what this OAuth client's being used for. I'm going to use implicit grant in this because this is a single-page JavaScript application. I don't have a server running where I can do authorization code grant. So we'll use implicit grant here. I'm going to redirect to my URL. Let me grab that. So when it's done authenticating, it's going to go back to my application. Save that. I accept. going to create my OAuth client, and it's going to generate a client ID for me. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that, copy that into the clipboard, and we're done with the OAuth client. All right, I'll go to my code. I've got that client ID in the clipboard, and I'll paste it in. So now as my application goes to perform implicit grant authentication, it'll use that client ID to validate that I am a known application to PureCloud and that I have permissions to access the API. My redirect URI is the same one I pasted in for the OAuth client as well. I tell PureCloud to create an instance of the API client, put that into a client variable, and then I'm going to get access to the user's API and the notification API. I perform an implicit grant, and on the promise, assuming that implicit grant does authenticate me, it'll come into this statement right here. And I'm going to call the API off the user's API. I'm going to do an HTTP GET to the user's me endpoint. And when that returns in that promise, I'm going to pull out the response, go to the response and pull out name. And I'm going to update the welcome tag with welcome and the user's name. I'm also going to log that to the console just in case. And I'm going to go create an instance of a notification channel. I'm going to do a post to the notifications channel endpoint. That'll return me an object that lets me set up a WebSocket. It'll give me the URI of a WebSocket, so I can create a WebSocket instance. And I've got a handler, an on-message handler on my socket that's going to get called when any events happen. Then I'm going to subscribe to the events I'm interested in. In this case, I'm interested in the routing section on queues for a specific queue. I've got a customer service or customer support queue. I went and previously pulled the ID for it. And I'm going to subscribe to conversation events that happen on that queue. And I send that to my notification channel. Now, anytime any conversation event happens, not just when it enters the queue, but if anything happens to it while it's in queue or it's ended, an event will fire. Those events come down the socket, so I've got my on-socket message event handler here, and I'll log an event. I'll log that I received an event. We'll go parse that JSON data. We'll get the topic name and the event body to be used later and log those. And the only thing I check here is if the topic matches the topic I subscribed for, then I want to add a bomb to the game. So for every event, if it's an event on conversations, it'll add a bomb to the game. Let's save that. Push that up to GitHub. All right. Again, I'm going to reload by emptying the cache. It pulls in the latest code instance from GitHub. While that's reloading, I'm going to go to the developer tools, to the developer center, and go to the developer tools and go to the chat. I'm already pre-configured here. I'm going to use a chat interaction to submit to the queue so that we have some interactions coming in. And I'm going to throw that into the customer support queue, which is the ID that I'm subscribing on in my code. Populate those fields and just get ready for that. I could have used a voice call. I could have submitted an SMS. I could have done a Facebook message, but chat's really easy because it's built into the development tools and just a really simple communication channel to use. Let PureCloud get totally refreshed here. All right. Let's get settled. I'm going to go to my Add Aster game, assuming everything worked. My game will load, much like it did before. I'm authenticated. It says, hello, welcome Jim Crespino. So it went and grabbed my user account and updated my name. It subscribed to notification events, and in a few seconds we should see a heartbeat message come on the WebSocket. So PureCloud sends a heartbeat message every so often just to keep that socket alive. So we still don't have any bombs coming. Let's go ahead and submit a chat and get a conversation into queue. I'll start a chat. Start that. Should be, once that chat starts, it's pretty immediate. So there, that conversation came into the queue and a bomb dropped in our game. If I cancel that, so this is, I did not filter out for is it an alerting event or is it an ending event. So if I end the chat, that's another event that's going to happen, another couple of events. And now I actually have 3 bombs jumping around my game because 3 queue conversation events happened. And so that's why I have so many bombs. And so the idea is as more and more conversations come into queue, the game should get harder and harder, and the agent would recognize that and say, all right, it's time to come off break and go back on queue. It's a trivial example, I'll admit, but it shows you the effectiveness of the Client SDK, which allows you to hook into those lifecycle events, and also how to use the PureCloud API in your custom applications to interact. So those APIs, you can subscribe to presence events for the logged in user so you can know whether they're available or not, whether they went on queue, what conversations they're handling. If they're handling a chat, you can use the chat APIs to help to push messages into the chat automatically. So if I mentioned earlier about the VR application or maybe Zoom, if they were to integrate properly, they could actually push those URLs using the chat API into the chat for the agent so that when they start a session, the agent doesn't have a copy and paste operation to perform. Client applications are a good starting point. They're great for PureCloud customers who want to integrate third-party applications. They're also great for partners. So if you're a partner and you want to build an application that's available in the App Foundry, we typically recommend that you start integrating as a client app, just like I performed today. And then we have, as you get that built, it's an easy step to go from that to be an App Foundry premium application, which allows you to have an install in the App Foundry. Just like we installed the custom client app, you can have a branded integration that's available to install, and it will self-configure and run with the lifecycle events and the API access, just as a custom client app is able to do as well. All right, well, that is about all I have to show you for client apps. Actually, I say that one last thing. I did not come up with this all on my own. The PureCloud product team and developers do a fantastic job of documenting our APIs. And on the PureCloud Developer Center at developer.mypurecloud.com, almost all and more about client apps are available. If you go to the Developer Center, go to APIs, and on the left-hand side, you will see client apps. You'll see the platform API. Many of you may be familiar with that, but the client apps are where the Client App SDK is talked about. We do have some samples available out here. So it talks about HTTPS. It talks about the URL interpolation that I mentioned. It talks about icons. There's some demo apps that are also out on GitHub pages. We like to take advantage of that. That's a great service GitHub offers for single-page, non-server-based applications. So we have some samples you're free to pull down from our PureCloud GitHub repo. In addition to this page, there's some more advanced concepts. So if you keep clicking on links on the left-hand side, we've got some, the advanced concepts talks about the life cycles. The Client App SDK talks about what's available in that API. So if you look on the core API, let's see, it's not the core API, it's the Client App. This is where I got the versions. Those are static functions. You get the PC environment. It talks about all the properties that are available on that, all the methods that you can call. So you do have the ability to interact with the user. You can get their profile. So instead of calling the API, I could have gone to the profile and gotten that. You have the ability to get interaction details about the interaction the customer is handling, so you don't have to use the API to do that. There's a lot built into the SDK that you can take advantage of that I did not do. We can go back here a couple of pages. The last thing I want to mention is I did everything manually through the PureCloud admin interface as far as creating an OAuth client, creating those integration entries, enabling the integration. The PureCloud API, PureCloud is an API-first platform. Everything you can do in the user interface is available as an API as well. So if you're interested in it, you can create an application entry through code through using the REST API. So here's how you would create that initial integration entry using the embedded client app. Here's where you put all the configuration for what the URL is, the properties, what groups it belongs to, the localization, the life cycle, all of that. And then lastly, the call to activate that application. So if that's of interest to you, if you were to write something that you wanted to auto-deploy to a PureCloud org, you could do that via our APIs. All right. So I'm going to take a look at some of the questions here that have come in. All right, we've got one from RJ. Can you access front-end state like agent name and presence without round-tripping to the cloud via the platform API? To a certain extent, yes. The Client App SDK should give you access to some of that. You can get access to who the user is. I don't think you get access to their presence, however. Yeah, so if there's something that's not available to you in the Client App SDK, you will have to go to the APIs to do some of that. All right, Greg asked, is there a way to build a client app into the Salesforce embedded client? Good question, so I did want to bring that up. Custom client apps are only available in the full-blown PureCloud UI. They're not available in the PureCloud Embedded Framework, which is our reduced real estate user interface that's embedded in Salesforce and Zendesk and other CRM applications. So unfortunately, we do not offer that kind of integration today. All right, let's go back here. Let's see, Dino. Somebody asked, do you know why you got the do you want to reconnect pop-up earlier? Probably because my internet connection is a wireless connection to a tower 10 miles away, and it sometimes loses connectivity. All right, let's see. I got a question from Michael. Our app is running on our own servers, right? Not on your own. That is correct. So we are not hosting the third-party applications inside of PureCloud or on our CDN or anything like that. Your third-party applications, whether you develop them or you buy them out of the App Foundry, those are hosted somewhere besides PureCloud. They can be on your own internal servers in your LAN as long as they're exposed to a HTTPS interface that PureCloud can reach, so it can punch through your firewall. So you can't expose corporate LAN URLs as long as PureCloud can reach them. Or you can use AWS or OpenShift or Azure or any hosting ISP that you want to. But we do not host inside of PureCloud. Let's see. Go through here. Let's say my client, so this is from Sam. Sam asked, let's say my client app has a server-side component, and I need to track which PureCloud user made a request. Is there a recommended method to securely identify the logged-in user, PureCloud user, to the server-side app? Client has a server-side component. Well, the way you would have to, after you authenticate using implicit grant or authorization code grant in the user interface, you would have to then pull the user that is authenticated and transmit that to your server-side app over some API that you have on your server, so that you could identify that user, and then any additional requests that would be made from that. You could use a session identifier that your server produces that's kept in a cookie, so that as they send more requests to your server, you would know who that user is making those additional requests. All right. If I'm not answering your questions, please, ask a follow-up question or something, and I will try and answer as best I can. Is it possible? So we got this from Skylar. Is it possible to subscribe to an incoming phone call event? Yes, it is. Those queue events actually will tell you about incoming phone calls. So where I just listened, is it a conversation event? You can get the details of that conversation. They're in that payload. They're in the body of that payload, and it'll tell you what type of media it is. So if you only wanted to react to chat messages, you could, or voice messages, you could. So if you want to check if it's a voice call, you can do that, and you can access the attributes of that call, such as the ANI and the DNIS, and when the call was started, and all sorts of properties on that call. All those are available through the API. So if you were to come over here to the API Explorer and renders, if you go to conversations, you can query for, I would have to get my user first. It's a multi-step deal, but if I went and queried my user, then I could query the conversations for my user. I can put my, hold on. Do this. This one will get I don't have any conversation, so I quit that chat. So let me throw a chat in. I'll show you how this works. Throw a chat in, get that started. I'll go back to the API Explorer and go back to conversations and get the active conversations from me. So on Jim, I'm logged in. I'm the one who, the chat, I've got to go on queue. Hit that, answer that. Now if I rerun that request, should get the conversation. And here you can see the participants that are part of that conversation. You can see it's a chat that's connected, et cetera. So all the properties of that conversation are available. And you would subscribe in about the same way, almost exactly the same way you would subscribe to events on a queue. You could subscribe to events on a user, so you could know what conversation specifically that user is handling, or you could subscribe at the queue level to know all the conversations that are going on in the contact center at that time. All right, scrolling through the list of questions that have been posted, and I think I have answered. Oh, here's some more. All right. We've got a question from Anders asking, can you disable that the app iframe is resized when an interaction is offered? No, you can't. It's just automatically going to slide over to give real estate to the interaction that the agent is handling on queue. There's really no way to prevent that. You can't even prevent if the user wants the full screen real estate for the interaction. They're going to get it because that's, the interaction is the highest priority thing for them to do. Application access is a little bit less, but there's no way to disable it. So I am told we have chartered a feature so that an app can get real estate in here while you're handling an interaction. So it'll be a third area of deployment for an app, and it wouldn't be you wouldn't share the screen real estate with the interaction as much as it would be like the widgets. You'd have a little panel over here on the right showing you some applications that are available just while you're handling interactions. So hopefully that might help. Let's see, from Robert, can I determine usage statistics for an app so that I can see who is playing games or how much time they spend playing? I believe so. If I go to the developer tool, so this isn't like an admin tool, but the developer tools has a new feature called the application inspector. Let me in this chat. Let me select a client. If I look at Add Astro, let's see what this gives me. I'm not sure this will tell me what users are using it. Oh no, this just shows API requests that app made. That's a good question, Robert. If you email me at developersupport@genesis.com and ask that question, I would be happy to get an answer back to you. Or you can post on the developer forums at the bottom of the developer center. Go to the forums and you can post a question in there and ask that. That's a good question. Okay. Ricardo is asking what kind of PureCloud license is needed so a customer can use a custom app. I don't know if custom apps are available under a PureCloud 1 or 2 license. I only have a PureCloud 3 license, and I haven't tested any of the others, some of the lower ones. I want to say it's probably a PureCloud 3 license is needed, though, for full PureCloud user interface access. That being said, again, Ricardo, if you'll email developersupport@genesis.com and ask that question, again, I'll be happy to follow up with you after this and get you an answer. And that goes for anybody, really. If you guys have specific questions about this webinar, please feel free to email developersupport@genesis.com. If you have questions about using the Client App SDK or the API, I'd encourage you to go to the Developer Center, go to the bottom and choose Forum, and either search the forum for previously asked questions, because it's very likely someone has asked the question that you have, or post a new question, and we monitor that and we'll get an answer for you. All right, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I'm not seeing any more questions in the panel. So I think at this point, we'll probably shut down the webinar. I hope you all learned something today that is of value to you. And if you have any questions, we are here to help, as I mentioned, via the developer support email or via the forums. And just encourage you to go out and look at the documentation on the Developer Center and in the PureCloud Resource Center as well on custom client apps and how to utilize those.